When a waitress whispers, "Help me," to the wrong stranger, she unleashes a war she never knew was coming. Elena Vale thought the silent man in the corner booth was just another customer. She had no idea he was a crime boss, or that she'd already saved his life once. Now, with hired killers closing in and her name buried in forged criminal records, Elena is caught between a stalker she can't escape and a protector whose world could destroy her. One whispered plea, one dangerous man, and a fire that will burn everything to the ground. If you're ready for a story about secrets, survival, and the kind of love that breaks all the rules, stay with me until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like punishment. Elena Vale stood behind the counter of Rosie's diner, watching the water hammer against the glass in thick, relentless sheets. Outside, Brooklyn drowned under a November storm that had been raging for 3 days straight. The streetlights flickered, the gutters overflowed, and somewhere across the street, hidden in the shadows between two parked cars, a man was watching her. Again. Elena's hands trembled as she refilled the coffee pot. She didn't look up, didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her the same way she'd felt them last night, and the night before that. Always the same spot. Always the same stillness, just standing there, waiting. For what? She didn't know. And that was the part that terrified her most. "You okay, sweetheart?" Elena flinched, nearly dropping the pot. Rosie stood beside her, wiping her hands on a grease-stained apron, her sharp eyes narrowed with concern. Rosie had owned this diner for 30 years and had seen every kind of trouble Brooklyn had to offer. She could spot fear from across a room. "I'm fine," Elena lied, forcing a smile that felt like broken glass. Rosie didn't buy it. "You don't look fine. You look like you're about to crawl out of your own skin." Elena opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. What was she supposed to say? That she was being followed by a stranger she couldn't identify? That she'd barely slept in 3 days because every sound outside her apartment sent her heart into her throat? That she'd started carrying a steak knife in her purse because pepper spray felt like a joke? "It's nothing," Elena whispered. "Just tired." Rosie gave her a long, measuring look, then sighed. "If you say so. But if something's wrong, you tell me. You hear?" Elena nodded, even though they both knew she wouldn't. Rosie squeezed her shoulder and walked back toward the kitchen, leaving Elena alone with the storm and the weight of eyes she couldn't escape. She glanced toward the corner booth. Roman Carrick sat there like a statue carved from stone and expensive tailoring. Dark suit, dark eyes, dark everything. He'd been coming to the diner for months now, always late at night, always alone. He never ordered much, black coffee, sometimes toast, but he stayed for hours, watching the room with the kind of stillness that made Elena think of predators waiting in tall grass. Most of the regulars avoided him. There was something about Roman that set off alarms in people's instincts, some primal warning that whispered danger even when he did nothing but sit and drink his coffee in silence. But Elena had never felt afraid of him. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her the first time she'd taken his order, like he was cataloging every detail, memorizing her face the way someone might memorize a map before heading into unknown territory. Or maybe it was the way he tipped. Always cash, always excessive, always folded neatly beside his empty cup. Tonight he wasn't drinking coffee. He was watching her. Elena's breath hitched. Their eyes met across the diner, and for one long, suspended moment, the storm outside seemed to fade into static. Roman's expression didn't change. He didn't smile, didn't nod, but something shifted in his gaze, something sharp and calculating, like a lock sliding into place. He knew. Somehow, he knew something was wrong. Elena broke eye contact first, her pulse hammering in her throat. She turned back to the counter, gripping the edge of the laminate so hard her knuckles went white. This was insane. She was losing her mind. Roman Carrick was just a customer. A strange, wealthy, unnervingly observant customer, but still just a man who liked bad coffee and quiet corners. He couldn't help her. No one could. The bell above the door chimed, and Elena's entire body went rigid. A man stepped inside, shaking rain from his jacket. 30s, maybe. Average height, forgettable face. He glanced around the diner with the casual interest of someone looking for a seat, then walked to a booth near the window. not the stalker. Elena exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. She was jumping at shadows now, seeing threats in every stranger who walked through the door. This couldn't keep going. She couldn't keep living like this. Afraid to sleep, afraid to go home, afraid to exist. But what choice did she have? She'd gone to the police 2 days ago, sat in a hard plastic chair at the precinct, and told a bored officer about the man who kept watching her. The officer had taken notes with all the enthusiasm of someone filling out a parking ticket, then explained that unless the man made contact or issued a direct threat, there was nothing they could do. Probably just a homeless guy looking for warmth, the officer had said, handing her a pamphlet about personal safety. But call us if anything changes. Anything changes. As if Elena was supposed to wait until she was attacked before anyone cared. She grabbed a notepad and walked over to the new customer, forcing her hands to stop shaking long enough to take his order. The man smiled up at her, a normal, harmless smile, and asked for a burger and fries. Elena wrote it down mechanically, her mind 1,000 miles away. When she turned to head back to the counter, she saw him again. The stalker. He was standing directly across the street now, rain pouring over him in sheets, his face half hidden beneath the hood of a dark jacket. But his eyes were locked on the diner, locked on her. Elena's vision blurred. Her hands went numb. The notepad slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dull slap. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. The diner lights buzzed overhead, too bright and too loud, and the smell of grease and burnt toast turned her stomach. She was going to be sick. She was going to scream. She was going to... Elena! The voice cut through the panic like a blade through fog. Roman. He was standing beside her, impossibly close, one hand extended toward her fallen notepad. He picked it up slowly, his movements precise and unhurried, then held it out to her. "You dropped this," he said quietly. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command attention. Elena stared at him, her mind still spinning, trying to make sense of the fact that Roman Carrick, silent, untouchable Roman Carrick, was standing less than 2 feet away, speaking directly to her. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Sit down." It wasn't a request. Elena's legs gave out before her brain could process the command. She sank into the nearest booth, her whole body trembling, and Roman slid into the seat across from her with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Up close, he was even more unsettling. Sharp cheekbones, clean-shaven jaw, eyes the color of slate, cold and calculating and impossibly focused. He looked like the kind of man who had never been afraid of anything in his life. "Talk to me," Roman said. Elena swallowed hard. You're terrified. You've been looking over your shoulder for 3 days. Someone's following you." Roman's gaze flicked toward the window, then back to her. "Tell me who?" The certainty in his voice should have scared her, should have sent her running, but instead it cracked something open inside her chest, something desperate and raw and so damn tired of being afraid. "I don't know who he is," Elena whispered. "He just watches. Every night. Across the street. And I don't know what he wants. And the police won't help. And Her voice broke. "I don't know what to do." Roman didn't react. Didn't offer empty reassurances or pointless advice. He just watched her with that same unreadable intensity, processing every word like data being fed into a machine. Then he leaned forward, close enough that Elena could see the faint scar along his jawline, barely visible beneath the carefully maintained exterior. "Do you trust me?" he asked. The question hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible. Did she trust him? She didn't even know him, didn't know his last name, or where he lived, or why he spent his nights sitting alone in a Brooklyn diner watching the world go by. But she knew the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she was something worth protecting. And right now, that was enough. "Yes," Elena breathed. Roman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something almost like satisfaction. "Then listen carefully," he said. "When you leave tonight, you're going to walk straight to your car. Don't look at anyone. Don't stop. I'll be behind you, but you won't see me. When you get home, lock your door and don't open it for anyone. Understand?" Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Roman reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, sleek, black, expensive, and slid it across the table toward her. "This is a burner," he said. Keep it on you at all times. If anything happens, you call the number saved in the contacts. It doesn't matter what time it is. You call, and I'll answer." Elena stared at the phone like it was a live grenade. "Why are you helping me?" For the first time since sitting down, Roman hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, something unguarded crossed his face, something that looked almost like guilt. "Because I owe you," he said simply. Before Elena could ask what that meant, Roman stood and walked back to his corner booth as if the conversation had never happened. Elena sat frozen, the burner phone cold and heavy in her palm, her mind racing with 1,000 questions she didn't have answers to. 2 hours later, Elena's shift ended at midnight. She clocked out with shaking hands, pulled on her rain-soaked jacket, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit her like a fist, rain driving sideways into her face, but she didn't stop. She walked straight to her beat-up Honda, just like Roman had told her to, her eyes locked on the cracked pavement beneath her feet. "Don't look. Don't stop. Don't think." She fumbled with her keys, nearly dropping them twice before finally jamming the right one into the lock. The door opened with a groan of rust and protest, and Elena threw herself inside, slamming it shut behind her. For a long moment, she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Then she looked up. The street was empty. No stalker, no Roman. Just rain and shadows and the distant wail of a siren somewhere in the city. Elena started the engine and pulled out onto the street, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel. She drove home on autopilot, her mind stuck on a loop of Roman's words, Roman's eyes, Roman's voice cutting through her panic like a lifeline she hadn't known she needed. "I owe you." What the hell did that mean? Her apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned 20 years ago. The hallway smelled like mildew and old cooking oil, and the fluorescent lights flickered like dying insects. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, every footstep echoing in the empty stairwell. When she reached her door, she stopped. Something was wrong. The door was unlocked. Elena's blood turned to ice. She always locked her door. Always. It was habit, instinct, survival, in a city that didn't forgive carelessness. She pushed the door open slowly, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The apartment was dark, silent, exactly as she'd left it, except for the envelope on the kitchen counter. Elena's hands trembled as she picked it up. No name, no return address, just thick, expensive paper sealed with a single piece of tape. She opened it. Inside was a stack of cash, $100 bills, crisp and clean, and a handwritten note. "Your rent is paid for the next 6 months. Stay safe." Elena's knees buckled. She sank onto the floor, the money scattering around her like evidence of a crime she didn't understand. Roman. Roman Carrick had been inside her apartment, had paid her rent, had been watching her, protecting her, orchestrating things from the shadows without her knowledge or consent, and she had no idea why. Elena sat there on the cold linoleum, surrounded by cash and questions, and for the first time in 3 days, she didn't feel afraid. She felt furious. The next morning, Elena didn't sleep. She spent the entire night pacing her apartment, the burner phone clutched in one hand, the note crumpled in the other. By the time the sun came up, she'd made a decision. She was going to confront Roman Carrick. She was going to march into that diner, sit down across from him, and demand answers. Who was he? Why had he been watching her? What did he mean when he said he owed her? And why the hell had he been paying her rent? But when Elena arrived at Rosie's diner at 8 a.m., Roman wasn't there. His booth sat empty, the cracked vinyl seat cold and untouched. Elena stared at it, frustration and confusion warring in her chest. She'd never seen the booth empty before. Not once in all the months Roman had been coming here. "Looking for someone?" Elena turned. Rosie stood behind the counter, pouring coffee with practiced efficiency. "The man who sits in the corner," Elena said carefully. "Do you know his name?" Rosie raised an eyebrow. "Roman? Sure, quiet guy. Tips well. Why?" "Do you know anything else about him?" Rosie shrugged. "Not much to know. Comes in late, drinks his coffee, minds his business, doesn't cause trouble." She paused, studying Elena with sharp eyes. "Why all the questions?" Elena hesitated. I need to talk to him." "Well, you're out of luck, sweetheart. He hasn't been in yet today." Rosie leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "But if you're looking for him, you might try the waterfront. I've seen him down there a few times. The waterfront? Elena repeated. Where exactly? Red Hook, near the old shipping warehouses. Rosie's expression turned cautious. But Elena, honey, if you're thinking about going down there alone, maybe don't. That part of town isn't exactly friendly. Elena barely heard her. She was already heading for the door, her mind made up. She needed answers. And Roman Carrick was going to give them to her. Red Hook waterfront. The warehouses loomed against the gray morning sky like the bones of dead giants. Elena parked her car near the edge of the industrial district and stepped out into the cold. The air here smelled like salt and rust and old diesel fuel. Seagulls screamed overhead, circling the water in lazy, predatory loops. She walked slowly between the buildings, her footsteps echoing off the concrete. Most of the warehouses looked abandoned, windows smashed, doors hanging off their hinges, graffiti bleeding across the walls in violent bursts of color. But one building stood out. It was clean, maintained, guarded. Two men stood outside the entrance, both wearing dark suits that looked out of place against the industrial decay. They watched Elena approach with the kind of detached professionalism that made her skin crawl. Lost? One of them asked. Elena stopped a few feet away, her pulse racing. I'm looking for Roman Carrick. The guards exchanged a glance. You got an appointment? The second one asked. No, but... Then you're not getting in. Elena's temper flared. Just tell him Elena Vale is here. He'll see me. The first guard pulled out a phone and stepped away, speaking in low tones Elena couldn't hear. After a long, tense moment, he returned and nodded to his partner. Go ahead. The door opened. Elena stepped inside, her heart hammering in her chest. The interior of the warehouse was nothing like she'd expected. Clean floors, modern lighting, rows of shipping containers stacked with military precision. And everywhere, people moving with purpose, voices echoing off the high ceiling, the air buzzing with controlled energy. This wasn't just a warehouse. It was an operation. Miss Vale? Elena spun around. A woman stood behind her, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She extended a hand. I'm Victoria. Mr. Carrick is expecting you. Follow me. Elena followed, her mind spinning. What the hell had she walked into? Victoria led her through the warehouse and up a metal staircase to a second-floor office with glass walls overlooking the entire operation below. And there, standing behind a desk with his back to the door, was Roman. He didn't turn around. Leave us, he said quietly. Victoria nodded and closed the door behind her, leaving Elena alone with the man who had somehow become the center of her unraveling world. Roman finally turned to face her. In the daylight, he looked different, harder, more dangerous. The expensive suit couldn't hide the muscle beneath it, and the cold intelligence in his eyes was no longer softened by the dim lighting of a diner booth. You shouldn't be here, Roman said. Elena's hands clenched into fists. You broke into my apartment. I paid your rent. Without asking. You needed help. I needed answers. Elena's voice cracked, all the fear and exhaustion and rage of the last 3 days spilling out in a rush. Who the hell are you, Roman? And don't tell me you're just some guy who likes coffee. This... She gestured at the warehouse below. This isn't normal. You aren't normal. So tell me the truth. Why have you been watching me? Why did you help me? And what did you mean when you said you owed me? Roman was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he walked to the window and looked down at the operation below. 6 months ago, he said quietly, I was in a car accident, bad one. My driver was killed instantly. I should have been too. He paused. But someone pulled me out of the wreckage before the car caught fire. A woman. She didn't leave her name. Didn't wait for thanks. Just disappeared into the crowd. Elena's breath caught. It was raining that night, Roman continued. I was barely conscious, but I remember her face. He turned to look at Elena, and for the first time his expression was completely open, vulnerable. It was you. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She shook her head. I don't remember. Brooklyn Bridge, late June, you were walking home from your shift. Roman's voice was steady, relentless. You saw the crash, ran toward it, pulled me out and called 911. Then you left before anyone could ask your name. Elena's legs felt weak. She remembered that night, the sound of screeching metal, the smell of gasoline, the heat of flames licking at her arms as she dragged a stranger from a burning car. She'd been terrified, shaking, but she hadn't thought twice. Someone needed help, so she'd helped. And then she'd gone home, scrubbed the smoke from her hair, and tried to forget. "You saved my life," Roman said simply. "So I've been making sure you stay safe, that's all." "That's all?" Elena's voice rose. "You've been stalking me for 6 months. I've been protecting you. I didn't ask for your protection. You didn't need to." Roman's expression hardened. "Someone's been following you, Elena, and it's not random. Whoever hired that man has resources, connections. They've been digging into your life, and I need to know why." Elena stared at him, her mind reeling. "You think someone's targeting me? On purpose?" "I know they are." "But why? I'm nobody. I don't have anything worth—" "That's what I'm trying to find out." Roman stepped closer, his voice dropping. "But until I do, you're in danger, real danger, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a cage closing around her. "I don't need a savior," Elena whispered. "I'm not trying to save you." Roman's eyes met hers. "I'm trying to keep you alive." And Elena, standing in the middle of a warehouse she didn't understand, looking at a man she barely knew, realized with sinking certainty that everything in her life had just changed, and there was no going back. Elena walked out of that warehouse with Roman's words echoing in her head like a warning she couldn't silence. "You're in danger, real danger." She drove back to her apartment in a daze, her hands gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles ached. The city blurred past her windows, gray buildings, gray sky, gray people hurrying through their gray lives. And all Elena could think about was the look in Roman's eyes when he'd told her someone was hunting her. He'd meant it, every word. She parked in her usual spot behind the building and sat there for a long moment, engine ticking as it cooled, trying to make sense of a world that had tilted sideways overnight. 6 months ago, she'd pulled a stranger from a burning car and then walked away because that's what you did when someone needed help. You helped. You didn't ask for payment or gratitude or protection. You just did the right thing and moved on. But Roman hadn't moved on. He'd been watching her, following her, paying her rent like she was some charity case he'd adopted. And now he was telling her that her entire life was a lie, that someone dangerous wanted her hurt, and that he was the only thing standing between her and disaster. Elena's phone buzzed. Not the burner Roman had given her, her regular phone. She pulled it out and stared at the screen. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She answered on the third ring, her voice barely steady. "Hello?" Silence. Then, just as she was about to hang up, a voice crackled through the line. Male. Distorted. Like someone speaking through a voice modulator. Elena Vale, 26 years old, lives at 2847 Parkside Avenue, apartment 4C, works at Rosie's Diner, no family, no savings, no one who would miss you if you disappeared. Elena's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you better than you know yourself." The voice was calm, almost pleasant, which made it infinitely worse. "You've been asking questions, Elena. Talking to people you shouldn't be talking to. That was a mistake." "I don't know what you have." "Roman Carrick is a dangerous man. He's using you, and when he's done, he'll throw you away like garbage. Walk away now, while you still can." The line went dead. Elena sat frozen, the phone trembling in her hand. Her entire body was shaking now, adrenaline flooding her system in waves that left her dizzy and sick. Someone had just recited her address, her life, her vulnerabilities, like reading from a script they'd written specifically to destroy her. She looked up at her apartment building, old brick, crumbling mortar, windows dark and empty, and suddenly it felt like a trap. Elena grabbed the burner phone Roman had given her and dialed the only number saved in the contacts. He answered on the first ring. "What happened?" Not a question. A demand. "Someone just called me," Elena said, her voice breaking. "They knew everything. My address, where I work. They said no one would miss me if I disappeared." Silence on the other end. But not the empty kind. The kind that felt like a storm gathering strength. "Where are you right now?" Roman's voice was steel wrapped in ice. "Outside my apartment." Don't go inside. Stay in your car. Lock the doors. I'm sending someone to you. Roman, what's happening? Who are these people? I don't know yet. The honesty in his voice was almost worse than a lie would have been. But I'm going to find out. And Elena, he paused. Don't trust anyone except the person I'm sending. Her name is Victoria. You met her at the warehouse. She'll get you somewhere safe. I don't want to go somewhere safe. I want answers. And you'll get them, but not if you're dead. The line went dead before Elena could respond. She sat there in her car, heart hammering, watching her apartment building like it might explode at any second. Minutes crawled by. Then a black SUV pulled up beside her, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The passenger door opened. Victoria stepped out, dressed in the same sharp suit she'd worn at the warehouse, her expression all business. She walked to Elena's car and tapped on the window. Miss Vale, we need to move. Now. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely unlock the door. She climbed out, legs unsteady, and Victoria immediately took her arm, not roughly, but with the kind of firm efficiency that suggested she'd done this before. What about my car? Elena asked stupidly. We'll take care of it. Get in. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and something else. Gun oil, maybe. Though Elena had never smelled gun oil in her life and had no idea why that thought occurred to her now. Victoria slid into the driver's seat and pulled out into traffic without a word. Where are we going? Elena asked. Somewhere Roman's people control. Victoria's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, checking for tails. Somewhere no one can get to you without going through us first. I don't understand what's happening. Why would anyone want to hurt me? I'm nobody. I don't have money. I don't have connections. You have Roman's attention. Victoria's voice was flat. That makes you valuable. And in his world, valuable things get used as leverage. The words hit Elena like a slap. So this is his fault. This is the fault of whoever's trying to get to him through you. Victoria took a sharp turn, the SUV's tires squealing on wet pavement. Roman's made enemies, powerful ones, and they've been looking for a weakness they can exploit. Apparently they think you're it. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to scream that she wasn't anyone's weakness, wasn't anyone's leverage, wasn't anyone's anything. But the truth was sitting in her throat like broken glass. She'd saved Roman's life 6 months ago, and now her life was being torn apart because of it. Some reward. The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a high-rise building in downtown Brooklyn. Victoria parked in a reserved spot and led Elena to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. They rode up in silence, the elevator humming softly, floor numbers ticking by too fast. 43rd floor. The doors opened onto a penthouse that looked like something out of a magazine Elena couldn't afford to buy. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, art that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. And standing in the center of it all, staring out at the city like a king surveying his kingdom, was Roman. He turned when they entered. "Leave us," he said to Victoria. Victoria nodded and disappeared back into the elevator without a word. Elena stood in the entryway, suddenly feeling small and out of place and furious. "Is this where you live?" "One of the places." "How many do you have?" "Enough." Roman walked toward her slowly, his eyes scanning her face like he was checking for damage. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm angry." "Good. Anger will keep you sharp." He gestured toward the massive leather couch. "Sit. We need to talk." "I don't want to sit. I want to know who's trying to kill me and why." Roman's jaw tightened. "The man who called you works for someone named Marcus Hale. He runs a competing organization, shipping, logistics, some legitimate business, mostly not. We've been at odds for years, but it's always been professional, competitive, never personal. Until now. Until now." Roman moved to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, neat. He held one out to Elena. She took it because her hands needed something to do. "Why would he come after me?" Elena asked. "What does hurting me accomplish?" "It puts pressure on me, makes me vulnerable, forces me to make mistakes." Roman drank his whiskey in one smooth swallow. "Hale knows I've been watching you. He probably has people tracking my movements, monitoring my resources, and when he saw me protecting you, he saw an opportunity." "To do what?" "To break me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. Elena set her glass down untouched. So I'm bait. You're a target. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing, Elena's voice cracked. You saved my life once, so now I'm supposed to what? Hide in your penthouse while you play gangster politics? Let you control my entire existence because you feel guilty? This isn't about guilt. Then what is it about, Roman? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided I was your responsibility without asking if I wanted to be. Roman's eyes flashed with something dangerous. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to drag you into my world, put you in danger, turn your life upside down? I've been trying to keep you out of this since the night you saved me. By stalking me? By paying my rent? By treating me like some fragile thing that needs protecting? By making sure you survived. Roman's voice rose for the first time, sharp and raw. You have no idea what kind of people I deal with, Elena, what they're capable of. If Hale thinks he can use you against me, he won't hesitate. He'll take you apart piece by piece just to watch me bleed, and there won't be anything left to save. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena stared at him, this man she barely knew, and saw something she hadn't expected to see. Fear. Not for himself, for her. It was written in the tension of his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on his empty glass, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. Roman Carrick was terrified, and that scared Elena more than anything else that had happened today. I need to understand something, she said quietly. When you say you've been protecting me, what exactly does that mean? Roman set his glass down carefully. It means I've had people watching your apartment, making sure you got to work safely, checking that no one was following you. I paid your rent because I found out your landlord was planning to evict you, and I couldn't protect you if you were homeless. How long? Since I got out of the hospital. 6 months. He'd been orchestrating her life for 6 months, and she'd never known, never suspected. Elena didn't know whether to be grateful or furious, so she settled for both. You had no right, she whispered. I know. I didn't ask for this. I know. And now I'm trapped in your world whether I want to be or not. Roman finally met her eyes. Yes. At least he was honest. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawling beneath them. From up here, Brooklyn looked almost beautiful. Lights twinkling in the gathering dusk, rivers of traffic flowing through concrete canyons, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to comprehend. Somewhere down there, Marcus Hale was planning her destruction. And up here, Roman Carrick was planning her survival. Elena pressed her palm against the cold glass. What happens now? Now I find out everything there is to know about Marcus Hale's operation. His people, his roots, his weaknesses, and then I make sure he understands that coming after you was the biggest mistake of his life. And me? What am I supposed to do, just sit here and wait? You stay safe, that's all I need you to do. Elena turned to face him. That's not an answer. That's a cage. It's a cage that keeps you alive. I'd rather be free and in danger than safe and suffocated. Roman's expression hardened. Then you're a fool. The words stung more than Elena expected. She grabbed her coat, still damp from the rain, and headed for the elevator. Where are you going? Roman demanded. Anywhere but here. Elena, stop. No. She jabbed the elevator button, once, twice, 3 times. You don't get to make my choices for me, Roman. You don't get to decide what risks I take or what life I live. I saved you because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted to be owned by you. The elevator doors opened. Elena stepped inside. Roman moved fast, faster than she'd thought possible, and caught the doors before they could close. If you leave, I can't protect you. Maybe I don't want your protection. Then you'll die. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Maybe, but at least I'll die making my own decisions. She could see the war happening behind Roman's eyes, the urge to stop her, to lock her in this gilded cage and throw away the key, battling against something else, something that looked almost like respect. Finally, he stepped back. If you're going to be reckless, Roman said quietly, at least be smart about it. Keep the burner phone on you. Don't go anywhere you can't see all the exits. And if anything feels wrong, anything, you call me immediately. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Roman reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black case. He opened it to reveal a sleek handgun, compact and deadly. "Do you know how to use one of these?" Elena stared at the weapon. "No." "Then learn." Roman closed the case and held it out to her. "Safety's here. Magazine release here. Point and pull the trigger. It's not complicated." "I'm not taking a gun." "Yes, you are." Roman's voice left no room for argument. "Because Hale's people won't hesitate, and I need to know you have a fighting chance if they find you before I do." Elena took the case with shaking hands. It was heavier than she'd expected. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. "Neither do I." Roman's eyes met hers. "But we're going to figure it out. Together." The elevator doors closed between them. Elena rode down alone, the gun case burning in her hands like evidence of a crime she'd already committed. When she reached the parking garage, Victoria was waiting beside the SUV. "He told you to follow me, didn't he?" Elena said. Victoria didn't deny it. "He told me to keep you alive. How I do that is up to me." She opened the passenger door. "Where to?" Elena wanted to say home, wanted to crawl back to her tiny apartment and pretend none of this was real. But home wasn't safe anymore. Maybe it never had been. "Rosie's Diner," she said finally. "I need to think." Victoria drove in silence, and Elena watched the city slide past, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of her life. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been making rent. Now she was carrying a loaded gun and running from people who wanted to use her as leverage against a crime boss she'd accidentally saved from death. Her life had become a bad movie. Except movies had heroes who knew what they were doing, and Elena was just a waitress with a stranger's gun in her purse and no idea how to survive the war she'd stumbled into. The diner was nearly empty when they arrived, just a few late-night regulars nursing coffee and pie. Rosie looked up from behind the counter and frowned when she saw Elena's face. "You look like hell, sweetheart." "I feel like it too." Elena slid onto a stool, and Victoria took a seat 2 down, her eyes constantly scanning the room. "Can I get some coffee?" "Coming right up." Rosie poured a cup and set it down with the kind of gentleness reserved for broken things. "You want to talk about whatever's going on?" "Not really." "Fair enough." Rosie wiped down the counter, her movements practiced and soothing. "But if you change your mind, I'm here." Elena wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into her frozen fingers. The diner felt safe in a way nothing else did right now. Familiar. Normal. A piece of the world she understood. But even here, she could feel Victoria's presence like a shadow, always watching, always ready, a constant reminder that normal was gone. Elena's phone buzzed, the burner this time. She pulled it out and stared at the screen. A text from Roman. "We need to talk. I found something." Elena's stomach dropped. She typed back, "What?" The response came immediately. "Not over text. Come back to the penthouse." "No." A pause. Then, "Fine. I'll come to you." Before Elena could argue, the line went dead. Victoria's phone buzzed a second later. She read the message and sighed. "He's coming here." "Of course he is." Elena drained her coffee and signaled Rosie for a refill. "Does he always get what he wants?" "Usually." Victoria's expression was unreadable. "But you're the first person I've seen tell him no, and live to regret it. Should I be flattered or terrified?" "Both." 20 minutes later, Roman walked into Rosie's diner like he owned it. He probably could have, if he'd wanted to. He slid into the booth across from Elena without asking permission, and Victoria moved to stand near the door, cutting off the exit. Rosie raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "You found something," Elena said, skipping the pleasantries. "What?" Roman pulled out a tablet and turned it toward her. On the screen was a series of documents, official-looking papers with seals and signatures and dense legal text that made Elena's head hurt. "These are financial records," Roman said quietly. "Transfers, invoices, payments, all tied to a shell company called Meridian Holdings." "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." Roman swiped to the next page. "Meridian Holdings owns your apartment building. They also own the diner you work at, the bank where you have your checking account, and the medical clinic you visited last year when you had the flu." Elena's blood went cold. "That's not possible." It's more than possible. It's deliberate. Roman's eyes were hard. Someone's been buying up pieces of your life, Elena, quietly, systematically, creating a web of control around you so complete that they could destroy you with a single phone call. Who? The paperwork's buried under layers of shell companies and offshore accounts, but I traced it back to the source. Roman paused. Marcus Hale. The name hit Elena like a physical blow. How long? The purchases started 8 months ago. 2 months before she'd pulled Roman from that burning car. Elena's mind raced. That doesn't make sense. How could he know I'd be there that night? How could he know I'd save you? He couldn't. Roman's voice was grim, which means this wasn't about me. Not at first. Then what was it about? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Roman closed the tablet. But whatever Hale's planning, he's been setting it up for months. And you're at the center of it. Elena felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Why me? I'm nobody. I don't have anything he could want. You have me now. Roman's eyes met hers, and that's enough. The weight of those words settled over Elena like a shroud. She thought about the phone call, the threats, the way her entire life had been quietly purchased by a man she'd never met. Thought about Roman's gun heavy in her purse, and Victoria standing guard by the door, and the way her world had collapsed into this, violence and paranoia and shadows she couldn't escape. I want to see him, Elena said suddenly. Roman's expression didn't change. No. I'm not asking permission. I want to look Marcus Hale in the eye and find out why he's trying to destroy me. Absolutely not. Why? Because it's dangerous? Because I might get hurt? Elena leaned forward, her voice sharp. I'm already in danger, Roman. I'm already hurt. At least let me understand why. Walking into Hale's territory is suicide. Then come with me. That's not how this works. Then tell me how it works. Elena's voice rose, drawing stares from the other customers. She didn't care. Because from where I'm sitting, the only way this ends is with me dead or owned, and I'm not okay with either option. Roman was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then finally he said, There might be another way. What way? Hale wants leverage, something he can use to control me. Right now, he thinks you're that leverage. But what if we gave him something else? Something he wants more? Elena's eyes narrowed. Like what? Information. Access. A way into my operation that he's been trying to find for years. Roman's expression was cold, calculating. We set a trap. Make him think he's won. And when he comes to collect, we take him apart. Using me as bait. Using you as a key. Roman's voice softened slightly. But only if you agree. I won't force you into this, Elena. If you want out, I'll find another way to keep you safe. It'll take longer, cost more, put more people at risk, but I'll do it. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man carrying weight he'd never asked for. Guilt and responsibility, and something else. Something deeper that she didn't have a name for yet. If we do this, she said slowly, I'm not just bait. I'm part of the plan. I make my own choices, take my own risks. You don't get to sideline me when things get dangerous. Things are already dangerous. Then it doesn't matter, does it? Roman held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. All right. Partners? He extended his hand across the table. Elena took it and felt the world shift beneath her feet one more time. When do we start? She asked. Roman's smile was sharp and dangerous. Tonight. The plan was insane. Elena knew it the moment Roman laid it out in the back office of the warehouse, surrounded by maps and surveillance photos, and enough weaponry to start a small war. But insane was better than helpless, and she'd spent too many years of her life being helpless to go back now. Hale owns a private club in Manhattan, Roman said, pointing to a photograph of a sleek building on the Upper East Side. Invitation only, very exclusive. It's where he conducts most of his business, legitimate and otherwise. He'll be there tomorrow night for a meeting with potential investors. And you want me to walk in there and do what exactly? Elena asked, her arms crossed. Not walk in. You'll be working there. Roman slid another photo across the table. We've arranged for one of the regular servers to call in sick. You'll take her place. Hale won't recognize you. He's never seen your face. But his security team will be running background checks on all the staff. Won't they find something suspicious? They'll find exactly what we want them to find. Victoria stepped forward, holding a thin folder. As of 2 hours ago, you have a complete employment history at 3 different upscale venues in Manhattan, references, tax records, the works. It'll pass any standard check. Elena took the folder and flipped through it, her stomach twisting. Seeing her own name attached to jobs she'd never worked, places she'd never been, felt like watching her identity dissolve in real time. And when I'm inside? You listen, Roman said. Hale will be discussing business with his investors. We need to know who they are, what they're planning, and how deep his organization runs. You'll be wearing a wire. Everything you hear gets transmitted back to us. That's it? Just listen? Just listen, Roman confirmed. You serve drinks, you keep your head down, and you get out. No improvising, no heroics. You hear something useful, you remember it, and you leave. Elena met his eyes. You don't trust me. I trust you to be brave. I don't trust you to be careful. There's a difference. The words stung, but Elena couldn't argue with them. Careful had never been her strong suit. Brave, reckless, stubborn, those she had in abundance. But careful required a kind of self-preservation she'd never quite mastered. When do I start? She asked. Tomorrow night. 6 p.m. sharp. Roman's expression was unreadable. Victoria will prep you, teach you the basics of service, the layout of the club, what to say and what not to say. You'll have 12 hours to become someone else. And if something goes wrong, then you run. Forget the mission, forget the wire, forget everything except getting out alive. I'll have people positioned around the building. If you need extraction, you say the code word, and they'll come for you. What's the code word? Roman paused, something flickering across his face too fast for Elena to read. Brooklyn. Of course it was. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like boot camp than espionage training. Victoria drilled Elena relentlessly on every detail. How to hold a tray without spilling, how to read a room full of dangerous men, how to blend into the background until she was practically invisible. They practiced in the warehouse until Elena's feet ached and her smile felt permanently frozen on her face. You're trying too hard, Victoria said, stopping her mid-stride. When you serve these men, you need to be wallpaper. Useful, but forgettable. Right now you look like you're memorizing their faces for a police lineup. Aren't I? Yes. But they can't know that. Victoria adjusted Elena's posture, her hands firm but not unkind. Relax your shoulders, soften your eyes. Think about something boring, grocery lists, laundry, anything that makes you fade into the background. Elena tried again, moving through the mock setup with a tray of empty glasses. This time, Victoria nodded. Better. Remember, you're staff. These men don't see staff as people. They see furniture that occasionally brings them drinks. Use that. By the time evening rolled around, Elena felt like she'd been wrung out and reassembled wrong. Every muscle ached. Her head throbbed from information overload, but when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Victoria had transformed her. The worn-out waitress was gone, replaced by someone sleek and polished. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her makeup was subtle but precise. The black uniform fit perfectly, expensive fabric that whispered money with every movement. You look the part, Victoria said, appearing behind her in the mirror. Now you just need to believe it. What if I can't? Then fake it. That's what we all do. The club was called The Meridian, which Elena found grimly appropriate given what Roman had discovered about the shell company. It occupied the top of 3 floors of a building that had probably cost more to construct than Elena would earn in 10 lifetimes. Outside, a doorman in white gloves checked invitations with the solemn efficiency of someone guarding the gates to heaven. Elena entered through the service entrance, a plain metal door in an alley that smelled like expensive garbage. Inside, the staff area was all harsh fluorescent lighting and exposed concrete, a deliberate contrast to the opulence that waited upstairs. A woman in a manager's uniform looked up from a clipboard as Elena entered. You're the replacement? Yes, ma'am. Elena Vale. The manager consulted her list. Right. You'll be working the West Salon. Keep the glasses filled, don't speak unless spoken to, and for the love of everything, don't stare at the guests. Some of them don't appreciate being looked at directly. Like predators, Elena thought. or royalty, or both. She followed the manager upstairs through a service corridor lined with mirrors and gilt frames into the main salon. The change was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Persian rugs covered marble floors. The air smelled like cigars and old money and the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. And there, holding court in the center of the room, was Marcus Hale. Elena recognized him from the surveillance photos Roman had shown her. 50-something, silver hair, expensive suit that probably cost more than her car. He stood surrounded by men in similar uniforms of wealth, their conversation punctuated by laughter that sounded like knives being sharpened. "Vale." The manager's sharp voice snapped Elena back to attention. "You're staring." "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be invisible." The manager handed her a tray. "Champagne, clockwise around the room, refill as needed. Go." Elena moved into the salon, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The wire Victoria had attached to her bra felt enormous, obvious, like a neon sign broadcasting her deception. But none of the guests looked at her as she circled the room. They looked through her, past her, around her, exactly like Victoria had said they would. She was furniture, useful, forgettable, invisible. Elena approached Hale's group and offered the champagne tray with a practiced smile that showed nothing but professional courtesy. One of the men took a glass without acknowledging her. Another waved her away with the dismissive gesture of someone shooing a fly. But Hale looked at her. His eyes met hers for just a fraction of a second, and Elena felt something cold slither down her spine. He didn't recognize her, couldn't possibly, but there was an intelligence in that gaze that made her skin crawl. Like he was cataloging her face just in case he needed to remember it later. Then he turned back to his conversation, and Elena was dismissed. She moved away slowly, her legs trembling, trying to keep her breathing steady. Through the hidden microphone, she could hear Roman's voice in the tiny earpiece Victoria had fitted her with earlier. "You're doing fine. Keep moving. Listen." Elena drifted closer to Hale's group, pretending to adjust empty glasses on a side table. "The shipping routes are secure," one of the men was saying. His voice carried the clipped consonants of old East Coast money. "We've established partnerships with 3 new distributors along the corridor. Everything moves through legitimate channels now." "And the inspection protocols?" Hale asked. "Handled. We have people in customs, people in the port authority. Nothing gets flagged that we don't want flagged." "Excellent." Hale swirled his champagne. "What about the Brooklyn situation?" Elena's hand froze on a glass. "Still unresolved," another man said. This one sounded younger, nervous. "Carrick's been making moves, consolidating territory, buying loyalty. He's becoming a problem." "Roman Carrick has always been a problem," Hale said calmly. "The question is whether he's a problem worth solving or a problem worth exploiting. What's the difference?" "Solving him would be messy, public. It would draw attention we don't need right now." Hale set down his glass, and Elena had to force herself to step forward and refill it. But exploiting him, finding the right pressure point and applying just enough force to make him bend, that's elegant, profitable, sustainable. "And you think you found that pressure point?" Hale smiled. It was the kind of smile that belonged on something hunting in deep water. "I know I have. Everyone has something they care about more than power, something that makes them vulnerable. Carrick's weakness is his conscience." The men laughed, the sound brittle and cruel. "He still thinks he's one of the good ones," Hale continued. "Still believes he can operate in our world while keeping his hands clean. It's almost admirable, certainly exploitable." "How?" "By giving him something worth protecting, something he'll sacrifice everything to keep safe." Hale's eyes drifted across the room, not landing on anything in particular. "Once you know what a man loves, you own him. And Roman Carrick, for all his careful planning, made the mistake of loving something I can reach." Elena's blood turned to ice. They were talking about her. She moved away from the group, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the tray. Roman's voice crackled in her ear. "Elena, status." She couldn't answer. Not here. Not with Hale 20 feet away in a room full of predators who would tear her apart if they suspected she was anything other than what she appeared to be. She made it to the service corridor before her legs gave out. The tray clattered against the wall, champagne glasses shattering in a cascade of crystal and expensive alcohol. "Elena!" Roman's voice was sharp now, urgent. Talk to me. She fumbled for the earpiece, her hands slippery with sweat. I'm fine. I need a second. What did you hear? Everything. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. They're planning something, using me to get to you. Hale said. She swallowed hard. He said once you know what a man loves, you own him. Silence on the other end, then, very quietly, get out, now. The mission is over. Use the code word. My people will extract you. But before Elena could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor behind her. She turned to find one of Hale's security team standing there, a man built like a freight train in an expensive suit. You all right, miss? His tone was polite, but his eyes were cold, assessing. Fine. Just clumsy. Elena forced a laugh that sounded brittle even to her own ears. I'll clean this up. Kitchen staff handles breakage. You should get back to the salon. Mr. Hale doesn't like the service interrupted. It wasn't a suggestion. Elena nodded and walked back toward the salon on legs that felt like they were made of water. The security guard followed her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence like a wall at her back. She was being watched now, suspected. Maybe not of espionage, but of being the kind of careless that got people fired. Either way, she'd lost her invisibility. Elena re-entered the salon and grabbed a fresh tray, trying to look professional and competent, and definitely not like someone who'd just overheard a criminal conspiracy. She moved through the room mechanically, offering drinks, collecting empties, being furniture. But Hale was watching her now. She could feel his eyes tracking her movements, the weight of his attention like a hand on the back of her neck. He knew. Maybe not everything, but something. Something had shifted in the air between them, some unspoken recognition that the game had changed. Elena's earpiece crackled. Victoria's voice this time calm and professional. Extraction team is in position. East service exit. When you're ready, walk that direction and say the word. But the security guard was still watching her, and Hale was still watching her. And between them and the exit were 50 feet of open floor and nowhere to hide. Elena made her decision. She set down the tray, smoothed her uniform, and walked straight toward Marcus Hale. What are you doing? Roman's voice was sharp in her ear. Improvising, Elena thought, being brave and reckless, and every other thing you warned me about. She stopped in front of Hale and met his eyes directly, breaking every rule of service Victoria had drilled into her. Mr. Hale, she said quietly, I believe you've been looking for me. The room went silent. Hale's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, calculation, interest. Have I? He said mildly. Elena Vale, the waitress from Brooklyn, the woman you've been using to threaten Roman Carrick. Elena kept her voice steady even though her heart was trying to break through her ribs. I thought we should meet face to face. The security guard moved toward her, but Hale raised a hand, stopping him. How interesting. Hale studied Elena like she was a particularly curious specimen under glass. Roman's little rescue project, I've heard so much about you. All of it purchased with forged records and intimidation, I assume. Some of it, but the important parts were given freely. Hale gestured to an empty chair. Sit. We should talk. I'd rather stand. I insist. It wasn't a request. Elena sat, acutely aware of every eye in the room now fixed on her. The wire pressed against her skin, recording everything. In her ear, Roman's voice was a constant stream of commands she couldn't follow. Abort! Elena, abort now, say the word. But Elena was done running. You've been building a cage around me for 8 months, she said to Hale, buying up my life piece by piece. I want to know why. Hale leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed. You really don't know? If I knew, I wouldn't be asking. Then allow me to explain. Hale smiled. 8 months ago, I learned that Roman Carrick had developed an unfortunate habit. He was visiting a particular diner in Brooklyn. Always late at night, always alone. For a man as careful as Roman, that kind of pattern suggested something worth investigating. You had him followed. I had him observed. There's a difference. Hale picked up his champagne. And what I observed was fascinating. Roman Carrick, the man who built an empire on calculated risk and emotional distance, was protecting a waitress he'd never spoken to, paying her rent, watching her from the shadows, It was so out of character, I knew it had to mean something. Elena's throat was dry. So you decided to use me. I decided to prepare. Because one day, Roman would slip. He'd reveal why you mattered, and when he did, I'd be ready to exploit it. Hale took a sip of his champagne. Then came the car accident. The one where you pulled him from a burning vehicle and disappeared before anyone could thank you. After that, the pattern made sense. He felt guilty. He fell in love. Hale's eyes glittered. Guilt, Roman could manage. Love makes him weak. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She started to deny it, started to say that Roman didn't love her, couldn't love her, barely even knew her. But the protest died in her throat. Because maybe Hale was right. Maybe that's what she'd been seeing in Roman's eyes all along. Not just guilt or obligation or the simple math of debt repaid. Something deeper. Something that had made him risk everything to keep her safe. So what now? Elena asked. You tell Roman you have me and he gives you whatever you want? Nothing so crude. Hale set down his glass. I don't need to threaten you, Elena. I already own you. Your apartment, your job, your bank account, your medical records, every piece of infrastructure that makes up a modern life. I could erase you with a phone call, make you disappear so completely that even Roman's resources couldn't find you. Then why haven't you? Because you're worth more to me visible, present, a constant reminder to Roman that the things he cares about exist at my pleasure. Hale leaned forward. Tell him that. Tell him I could destroy you at any moment, but I'm choosing mercy. For now. Elena stood, her legs somehow steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. You know what I think, Mr. Hale? Please, enlighten me. I think you're afraid of him. I think Roman Carrick scares you so much that you've spent months building this elaborate trap, and you still don't have the courage to spring it, because you know that the moment you move against him directly, he'll burn your entire operation to the ground. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Hale's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat and cold. You should leave now, Miss Vale, before you say something you can't take back. Brooklyn, Elena said clearly. The code word. Hale frowned, not understanding, but his security team did. They moved toward Elena just as the east windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and smoke. The room erupted into chaos. Men shouted, alarms blared, and through the smoke came figures in tactical gear, moving with military precision. Elena dove behind a table as gunfire cracked overhead. Not aimed at her, not aimed at anyone, just enough noise and flash to create panic and confusion. A hand grabbed her arm. Victoria, appearing out of the smoke like a ghost, her face grim behind a respirator. Time to go. They ran. Through the smoke, through the service corridor, downstairs that seemed to go on forever. Behind them, Elena could hear Hale's security team shouting, trying to restore order, but Victoria moved with the confidence of someone who had planned this extraction down to the second. They burst out of the east exit into an alley where a black SUV waited, engine running. Victoria shoved Elena into the back seat and climbed in after her, and the vehicle was moving before the door even closed. Roman sat in the front passenger seat, his face carved from stone. You improvised, he said, not turning around. I know. I told you no heroics. I know. You could have been killed. I know. Elena's voice cracked. But I wasn't, and I got you what you needed. Roman finally turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made Elena's breath catch. Fury and relief and something else, something raw that made her understand exactly what Hale had meant when he said, "Love makes you weak." What did he tell you? Roman asked quietly. Elena told him everything, every word of the conversation, every threat, every implication. When she finished, Roman was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. It's time, he said to whoever answered. Move on all targets, now. He hung up and met Elena's eyes in the rearview mirror. What are you doing? She asked. What I should have done months ago. Roman's voice was cold steel. I'm going to war. The SUV drove through the night, and Elena watched the city lights blur past, knowing that whatever came next would be written in fire and blood. And she'd be right in the middle of it, because she'd made her choice back in that salon. She'd walked straight into the predator's den and announced herself, and there was no walking that back. Hale knew her face now, knew her name, knew she was the pressure point that could make Roman Carrick bend. But what Hale didn't know, what maybe even Roman didn't fully understand yet, was that Elena Vale had spent her entire life being pushed around by people with more power, more money, more everything. And she was done bending. The warehouse was blazing with activity when they arrived. People moving with controlled urgency, voices sharp with commands, the whole operation mobilizing like a sleeping giant finally roused to action. Roman led Elena through the controlled chaos to his office, where screens covered every wall showing feeds from security cameras across the city. "What am I looking at?" Elena asked. "Hale's empire." Roman gestured to the screens. Import companies, shipping routes, nightclubs, restaurants, construction firms. Everything he owns, everything he controls, mapped out in real time. "And you're going after all of it?" "I'm cutting off his air supply." Roman's eyes were hard. "By morning, every legitimate business he owns will be under investigation. Every illegal operation will be compromised. Every ally will know that Marcus Hale is toxic to associate with." Elena stared at the screens, watching red markers appear across the city like a spreading infection. "This is because of what he said to me, about owning me. This is because he made it personal." Roman turned to face her fully. "Hale was right about one thing. I do have a weakness, but he was wrong about what it makes me." "What does it make you?" "Dangerous." The word hung in the air between them like a promise. "Hale thought love would make me vulnerable. He doesn't understand that there's nothing more terrifying than a man with something to lose." Elena's heart hammered in her chest. "Roman!" An explosion shook the building. The windows rattled, the lights flickered, and on one of the security screens flames erupted from a facility on the waterfront, one of Roman's shipping warehouses, burning against the night sky like a funeral pyre. Roman's face went white. "Get everyone out! Now!" "There are people inside," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "Night shift. At least a dozen workers." Roman was already moving, grabbing his jacket, heading for the door. Elena ran after him. "Where are you going?" "To get them out." "The building's on fire." "I know." Roman's eyes met hers, and Elena saw something in them she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself, for the people trapped inside. "This is Hale's response. He's trying to draw me out, force me to make a mistake. But I can't leave them." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "You said we're partners." Elena grabbed his arm. "That means I don't get to watch from the sidelines when things get dangerous." Roman looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." They raced to the waterfront in the SUV, Victoria driving with the kind of controlled aggression that suggested she'd done this before. By the time they arrived, the warehouse was fully engulfed, flames pouring from broken windows, smoke billowing into the night sky thick enough to block out the stars. Fire trucks were already on scene, but the building was too far gone. They'd pulled back to defensive positions, trying to keep the blaze from spreading to neighboring structures. Roman jumped out before the SUV fully stopped and ran toward the fire captain. "There are people inside." The captain shook his head. "Building's compromised. We can't send anyone in." "Then I'm going." "Sir, that's suicide." But Roman was already moving, pulling a respirator from one of the emergency kits, heading straight for the burning building. Elena ran after him, ignoring the shouts from the fire crew, ignoring Victoria's voice calling her back. The heat hit her like a wall. Even 20 feet from the entrance, the air was hot enough to sear her lungs. Elena pulled her jacket over her mouth and followed Roman into the inferno. Inside was hell. Smoke so thick she couldn't see 3 feet in front of her face. Heat that made her skin feel like it was cooking. The roar of flames overhead like a living thing, hungry and vicious. Roman grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, navigating through the chaos with the confidence of someone who knew this building's layout by heart. "Where are they?" Elena shouted over the roar. "Break room, back corner." They ran through corridors lined with fire, past shipping containers that groaned and buckled under the heat. Somewhere above them, something massive collapsed, sending sparks cascading like deadly rain. And then Elena heard it. Voices, shouting, screaming. Roman kicked open a door and they found them. 12 people huddled in a break room, trapped behind a wall of flame that blocked the only exit. Their faces were black with smoke, eyes wide with terror. "We're getting you out!" Roman shouted. "Everyone stay low, follow me!" But the flames were spreading faster than they could move. The corridor they'd come through was already impassable, the fire feeding on oxygen and old wood and 20 years of accumulated grease and chemicals. They were trapped. Elena's mind raced. There had to be another way out. A window, a service door, something. "The loading dock!" one of the workers gasped. "Other side of the building. There's a roll-up door." Roman nodded. "Can you make it?" "If the fire hasn't reached it yet." They moved as a group, Roman leading, Elena bringing up the rear, making sure no one got left behind. The heat was unbearable now, the smoke so thick Elena's eyes streamed with tears. Her lungs burned. Her skin felt like it was blistering, but she kept moving. Through a maze of corridors, past offices already consumed by flame, around corners where the floor was starting to buckle and crack. One of the workers stumbled and Elena caught him, hauling him upright, half carrying him the last 50 feet. The loading dock appeared ahead like salvation. Roman hit the door release, and the roll-up door began to rise with agonizing slowness. Behind them, the ceiling groaned. "Run!" Roman shouted. They ran. All 14 of them, sprinting for the opening as the building came apart behind them. Elena felt the floor shift beneath her feet, felt the heat of flames at her back. She dove through the opening just as a support beam crashed down exactly where she'd been standing. Outside, the night air felt like ice against her scorched skin. Elena collapsed on the pavement, coughing so hard she thought her lungs might tear apart. Around her, the workers were doing the same, coughing, crying, but alive. All of them. Alive. Roman appeared beside her, his face black with soot, his jacket smoking. He pulled her to her feet and checked her over with hands that shook slightly. "You're insane," he said. "So are you." And then he kissed her. Hard and desperate, and tasting like smoke and fear and the kind of relief that comes from surviving something that should have killed you both. Elena kissed him back, her hands fisting in his ruined jacket, her entire body shaking with adrenaline and terror and something else entirely. When they finally broke apart, the warehouse was still burning behind them, flames reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. But everyone had made it out. Every single person. Roman looked at the burning building, then back at Elena, and something shifted in his expression. Something final. "Hill just made his last mistake," he said quietly. And Elena knew, with absolute certainty, that the war had truly begun. The paramedics wanted to take Elena to the hospital. She refused. "I'm fine," she insisted, waving away the oxygen mask they kept trying to press into her hands. Her voice was hoarse from smoke. Her clothes were ruined, and she was pretty sure she'd lost at least one layer of skin from the heat. But none of that mattered. Not when Roman was already on his phone, orchestrating a response that would reshape the entire city before dawn. "You're not fine," Victoria said, appearing beside her with a blanket that Elena hadn't asked for. "You ran into a burning building." "So did Roman." "Roman's insane. You don't have that excuse." But Victoria's voice was almost gentle as she draped the blanket around Elena's shoulders. "At least sit down before you fall down." Elena sat on the bumper of a fire truck and watched the warehouse burn. Firefighters had given up trying to save it and were focused on containment now, keeping the flames from spreading to the neighboring buildings. But Roman's facility was lost. Everything inside, equipment, inventory, records, all of it reduced to ash and twisted metal. Hail had struck a devastating blow, and Roman was going to make him pay for it in blood. Elena could see it in the way Roman moved through the chaos, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and lethal as he gave orders to people she couldn't see. This wasn't the careful, calculated man who'd watched her from a diner booth for 6 months. This was someone else entirely. Someone forged in fire and fury. Someone who'd spent years building an empire and wouldn't let it burn without taking everything down with him. "How bad is it?" Elena asked when Roman finally ended his call and came to stand beside her. "Bad enough." Roman's jaw was tight. That warehouse was a front for legitimate shipping operations. Everything inside was legal, documented, insured. Hale torched it anyway, just to send a message. What message? That he's willing to burn the whole city down if that's what it takes to break me. Roman's eyes were cold and distant. He's gambling that I'll back down to prevent collateral damage. Civilian casualties, public attention. Will you? Roman looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her understand exactly how dangerous he truly was. No, he said simply. Because the moment I show weakness, Hale wins. And everyone I've been protecting, you, my people, everyone who depends on me for safety, becomes a target. So I'm going to finish this tonight. How? By giving the federal investigators everything they need to take Hale apart piece by piece. Roman pulled out his phone and showed Elena a series of files, financial records, shipping manifests, communications logs. I've been collecting evidence against Hale for years. Insurance, in case I ever needed leverage. Now I'm giving it all to the FBI. Elena's eyes widened. You're cooperating with the feds? I'm pointing them at a bigger fish and stepping out of the way while they feed. Roman's smile was sharp and humorless. Hale's operation is built on a foundation of corruption, bribes, blackmail, fraud. Once the investigators start pulling threads, the whole thing will unravel. His partners will turn on him to save themselves. His assets will be frozen. His protection will evaporate. And he'll spend the rest of his life in a federal prison. What about you? Won't they investigate your operation too? They already are. Have been for years. Roman pocketed his phone. The difference is that my organization is clean enough to survive scrutiny. Hale's isn't. That's why he's been trying to force me out. Because he knows that in a fair fight under legal examination, I win. Elena tried to process that. So you're not actually a criminal? I operate in gray areas. Import-export, logistics, private security. Some of it's questionable. None of it's prosecutable. Roman's expression softened slightly. I learned a long time ago that the best way to survive in this world is to stay just legal enough that the authorities consider you more useful than dangerous. And Hale never learned that lesson. Hale got greedy, started cutting corners, making deals with people he shouldn't have trusted, leaving evidence scattered across 3 continents. All I'm doing is collecting it and putting it in the right hands. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, federal plates clearly visible even in the firelight. 2 agents in suits stepped out, their expressions professionally neutral. Roman walked over to meet them, and Elena watched as he handed over a thick envelope that probably contained enough evidence to end Marcus Hale's entire world. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. The agents took the envelope, asked a few questions that Roman answered with the ease of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, and then got back in their car and drove away. Just like that. No drama. No arrests. Just the quiet, methodical destruction of a criminal empire executed with the precision of a surgical strike. Roman returned to Elena and helped her to her feet. We need to move. Hale's going to know something's wrong the moment the feds start making arrests, and he'll come after the people he thinks betrayed him. Meaning us. Meaning you. Roman's hand tightened on her arm. I can defend myself. You can't. So you're going somewhere safe until this is over. We've had this argument before, Elena said. It didn't end well for you then either. Elena, no! She pulled her arm free, ignoring the way her muscles screamed in protest. You don't get to kiss me in front of a burning building and then lock me away like I'm some delicate thing that needs protecting. I'm in this now. All the way in. And if Hale's coming for us, then I want to be somewhere I can actually help instead of hiding in a safe house wondering if you're alive or dead. Roman stared at her for a long moment. Something conflicted warring behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Fine, but you stay with me. No improvising, no heroics. And if I tell you to run, I know, I run. Elena met his eyes. But you have to promise me something in return. What? You stop trying to handle everything alone. You stop making decisions without telling me. And you stop acting like keeping me safe is the only thing that matters. Elena's voice was steady, certain. Because I didn't survive that fire just to become another burden you have to carry. For the first time since the warehouse exploded, Roman's expression softened into something almost like relief. Deal. They left the waterfront together, Victoria driving while Roman made call after call, his network mobilizing in response to commands Elena only half understood. By the time they reached the penthouse, the sun was starting to rise over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Elena too much of fire. Inside, the penthouse was a hive of controlled activity. People she'd never seen before moved through the space with purposeful efficiency, setting up computers, monitoring police scanners, tracking movements across the city in real time. This was Roman's war room, and Elena was standing in the center of it. "Status," Roman said to a young man hunched over a laptop. "Hale's in the wind. Left his club 20 minutes after the warehouse fire. We're tracking his vehicle, but he's moving erratically. Probably knows he's being followed." "What about his lieutenants?" "3 arrested already. FBI's moving fast, hitting multiple locations simultaneously. Hale's entire command structure is collapsing." Roman nodded, his expression grim with satisfaction. "And our exposure?" "Minimal. The feds are focused on Hale's organization. Your name hasn't come up in any of the warrants." "Good. Keep monitoring. I want to know the moment Hale surfaces." The young man nodded and returned to his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Victoria approached with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Elena. "You should eat something. When's the last time you had food?" Elena tried to remember and came up blank. "Yesterday? Maybe?" "Definitely yesterday." Victoria steered her toward the kitchen. "Come on, you're no good to anyone if you pass out from low blood sugar." The kitchen was all marble and stainless steel, the kind of space that looked like it had never been used for actual cooking. Victoria opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Eggs, cheese, vegetables that probably cost more than Elena's weekly grocery budget. "You don't have to," Elena started. "Shut up and sit down." Victoria cracked eggs into a bowl. "Roman's going to be useless for the next few hours. Someone needs to make sure you don't collapse." Elena sat at the counter and watched Victoria cook, her mind still spinning from everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. The club, Hale, the fire, Roman's kiss, the federal agents. It all felt surreal, like watching a movie of someone else's life. "How long have you worked for Roman?" Elena asked. 4 years. Victoria whisked the eggs with practiced efficiency. "I was head of security for a company he acquired. He offered me a job. I took it." "Why?" "Because he pays well, doesn't lie to his people, and actually gives a damn whether they live or die." Victoria poured the eggs into a hot pan. "That's rarer than you'd think in this business." "What business exactly?" Victoria smiled slightly. "The kind where you learn not to ask too many questions. But if you're asking whether Roman's a good man, yeah, he is. Complicated, dangerous, probably going to get himself killed one day trying to save someone who doesn't deserve it. But good. He thinks he's protecting me. He is protecting you, but that's not the same as controlling you, and he's smart enough to know the difference." Victoria slid a perfect omelet onto a plate and set it in front of Elena. "Eat. Then get some sleep. You're going to need your strength for whatever comes next." Elena ate mechanically, tasting nothing, her mind already racing ahead to the endgame she could feel approaching like a storm on the horizon. Hale was wounded, but not dead, cornered, but not caught, and cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. She finished eating and found Roman standing by the windows, staring out at the city with the kind of intensity that suggested he was trying to will it into submission through sheer force of concentration. "You should sleep," Elena said. "Can't. Not until I know where Hale is." "Victoria said he's in the wind." "Victoria's optimistic. I know Hale. He's not running. He's planning his next move." Roman's reflection in the glass looked haunted. "He knows his empire's falling apart. Knows the feds have enough evidence to put him away for life. So he's got nothing left to lose." "What does that mean?" "It means he's going to come for me directly. One last attempt to take me down before they drag him away in handcuffs." Roman turned to face her. "And he's going to use you to do it." Elena's stomach dropped. "You think he'll try to take me hostage?" "I think he'll try to kill you in front of me, just to watch me break." Roman's voice was flat, emotionless, like he was discussing the weather instead of Elena's potential murder. "That's what I'd do, if I were him. Maximum damage, maximum pain, maximum revenge for destroying everything he built." "That's insane, that's survival. When you've lost everything else, all that's left is spite." Roman moved closer, his eyes intense. So I need you to understand something, Elena. If Hale comes for you, I will burn the entire city to ashes before I let him touch you. I will cross every line, break every rule, sacrifice everything I've built, if that's what it takes to keep you safe. And I need to know that you're okay with that. Elena's breath caught. You're asking permission to become a monster. I'm telling you that I already am one. I've just been very good at hiding it. Roman's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You saved my life, Elena, and in doing that, you gave me something I thought I'd lost years ago. Hope. Purpose. A reason to be something better than what I was. But if Hale takes that away, if he takes you away, there won't be anything left of the man you saved. Just the monster I used to be. Elena covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face. Then we don't let him take me. We don't let him take anything. We finish this together. Together, Roman repeated, like he was testing the word. Then he kissed her, soft and gentle and completely at odds with the violence simmering beneath his surface. The moment shattered when the laptop across the room chimed urgently. Roman pulled away and strode over to where the young tech was pointing at his screen, his face pale. What is it? Roman demanded. Hale just sent a message. To you. Directly. Roman leaned over the screen and read whatever was there, his expression going completely still. Elena moved to stand beside him and saw the email open on the screen, just 3 lines of text. You took everything from me, Carrick. So I'm going to take everything from you, starting with the diner, 30 minutes. Come alone, or everyone inside dies. Elena's blood turned to ice. Rosie's diner. Roman was already moving, grabbing his jacket, checking a gun she hadn't realized he was carrying. Get Victoria, full tactical team. I want everyone we have converging on that location now. He said, come alone, Elena pointed out. He's lying. The moment I walk in there alone, his people will gun me down and then torch the place anyway. This isn't a negotiation. It's an execution. Roman headed for the elevator. I'm going to end this. Elena ran after him. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's my diner, Roman. Rosie's my friend. Those people are my regulars. I'm not staying here while they're in danger. You'll slow me down. Then I'll keep up. Elena stepped into the elevator beside him. You can argue, or you can accept that I'm coming either way and plan accordingly. Roman looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're going to get yourself killed. Probably, but at least I'll die doing something that matters. The elevator doors closed and they descended into the parking garage, where Victoria was already waiting with the SUV and a team of 4 heavily armed men who looked like they ate danger for breakfast. Hale's at Rosie's diner, Roman said as he climbed into the vehicle. He's threatening to kill everyone inside if I don't show up alone in 30 minutes. We're going in hot, full extraction, everyone comes out alive. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something cold and professional settled over her features. Rules of engagement. Hale's mine. Everyone else, disarm and disable. Lethal force authorized if they resist. Priority is civilian safety. Understood. Victoria pulled out into traffic, driving with the controlled aggression of someone who'd done tactical operations before. The team checked their weapons with practiced efficiency, and Elena sat in the middle of it all, feeling completely out of her depth. Roman handed her a Kevlar vest. Put this on. I don't know how... Velcro straps, pull them tight. Roman helped her into the vest, his hands steady and sure. When we get there, you stay in the vehicle until I give the all clear. If shooting starts, you get down and stay down. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The drive to Brooklyn felt both endless and far too short. Traffic parted in front of Victoria's aggressive driving, and within 15 minutes they were pulling up 2 blocks from the diner. Roman's phone buzzed with updates from surveillance teams already in position. 8 hostiles inside, someone reported over the comm system. Hale's at the back booth. Looks like he's got 4 civilians, the owner and 3 customers. Windows are covered, no clear shot from outside. Explosives? Roman asked. Negative, just small arms. They're not planning to blow the place. This is personal. Roman nodded, his expression carved from stone. He turned to Elena. Last chance. Stay here. Let me handle this. Elena looked past him at the diner, the place where she'd worked for 3 years, where Rosie had given her a job when no one else would, where she'd served coffee to Roman Carrick and unknowingly changed both their lives forever. She thought about Rosie behind the counter, probably terrified but trying not to show it. Thought about the regulars who came in every night for pie and conversation and the simple comfort of familiar faces. They were in danger because of her, because she'd saved Roman, because she'd become something Marcus Hale could use as leverage. "I'm coming with you," Elena said. "Not to fight, but because Rosie needs to see a friendly face, needs to know that someone gives a damn about whether she lives or dies." Roman studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say." "And Elena?" His voice softened. "If something happens to me, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Just run." "Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway." Elena promised, hating every word. They moved toward the diner in a coordinated formation. Roman in front, Elena directly behind him, Victoria and the team flanking them with weapons ready. The street was eerily quiet, civilians already evacuated by Roman's people under the guise of a gas leak. Smart, kept bystanders clear without alerting Hale that something was wrong. Roman stopped at the diner's front door. Through the covered windows, Elena could see shadows moving inside. Hale's people, probably watching the street, waiting for Roman to walk into their trap. "On my signal," Roman said quietly into his comm. Then he looked at Elena one last time. "Stay close." He opened the door and stepped inside. The diner looked exactly the same as it always did. Cracked vinyl booths, chipped formica counters, the smell of coffee and grease that had soaked into the walls over decades. But now it felt like a tomb. Hale's men were positioned throughout the space, guns visible, their faces hard and professional. And there, in the back booth that used to be Roman's, sat Marcus Hale, with Rosie beside him and a gun pressed to her head. Rosie's eyes met Elena's across the diner, wide with fear but also relief. She was alive. They were all alive. For now. "Roman Carrick," Hale said pleasantly, like they were meeting for coffee instead of a hostage situation. "Right on time. And you brought the girl. How considerate." "Let them go, Hale. This is between us." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, this is very much about her." Hale's gun didn't waver from Rosie's temple. "You destroyed my empire for this waitress, burned everything I built just to protect someone who means nothing in the grand scheme of things. That's not business, Roman. That's emotion, weakness. It's called having principles. You should try it sometime." Hale laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. "Principles. Is that what you call it?" "I call it stupidity. You could have walked away. Could have let me have the girl, avoided all this unpleasantness. But no, you had to play hero, had to prove you were better than me." "I don't have to prove anything. You did it for me the moment you decided to threaten innocent people." "Innocent?" Hale's smile was vicious. "There's no such thing. Everyone's guilty of something. This woman—" He pressed the gun harder against Rosie's head. "Probably cheats on her taxes. These customers probably have parking tickets they haven't paid. The girl you're trying to save probably jaywalks every day of her life. Nobody's innocent, Roman. We're all just choosing which rules to break." "Let them go," Roman repeated, his voice deadly calm. "Take me instead. That's what you want, isn't it? Revenge? Make it personal. Put the gun to my head and pull the trigger. But let the civilians walk." Hale pretended to consider it. "Tempting, but I think I'll keep them right where they are. Insurance, you understand. Because the moment I let them go, your people outside are going to put a bullet in my head. This way, everyone stays nice and civil." Elena's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She could see the calculation in Hale's eyes, the cold math of a man who'd already decided how this ended. He was going to kill them all. Rosie, the customers, Roman, Elena, everyone who'd played a part in his downfall was going to die in this diner, and there was nothing any of them could do to stop it. Unless someone broke the rules. Elena stepped forward, away from Roman's protective shadow. "Wait," she said. "If you want revenge, take it from me. I'm the one who saved Roman. I'm the reason all of this started. So let everyone else go and we'll call it even." "Elena, no," Roman started, but Hale was already smiling. "Now that's interesting. The girl has more courage than you do, Roman, or less sense. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." "I'm serious," Elena said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "You let Rosie and the customers walk out that door, and I'll stay. No resistance, no tricks, just me for them. Hale's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. And what makes you think your life is worth 3 strangers? Because it's the one thing Roman values more than his empire. You said it yourself, he destroyed everything to protect me. So take me, hurt me, kill me if that's what you need, but let the innocent people go first. Roman moved to grab her, but Elena was already walking toward Hale, her hands raised, showing she wasn't a threat. Behind her, she could hear Victoria's voice in Roman's ear, probably telling him to take the shot, to end this before Elena got herself killed. But Roman didn't move. He just watched Elena walk into the lion's den with an expression that looked like his heart was being torn from his chest. Elena reached the booth and stood directly in front of Hale, close enough that she could see the tiny flecks of gold in his eyes, could smell the expensive cologne that probably cost more than her monthly rent used to. "Let them go," she said quietly. "Please." Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled the gun away from Rosie's head and gestured toward the door. "Go, all of you. Run along before I change my mind." Rosie didn't move. "Elena, go," Elena said firmly. "I'll be fine. Just go." Rosie stood slowly, her eyes locked on Elena's, trying to communicate something that Elena couldn't quite read. Then she and the other customers moved toward the door, walking past Roman, who looked like a statue carved from ice and fury. The moment they were outside, Hale's men closed in, 4 of them, guns raised, surrounding Elena and Roman in a tight circle. Hale stood and stretched like someone who'd been sitting too long. "Well," he said pleasantly, "now that we've dispensed with the unnecessary witnesses, shall we get down to business?" "You said you'd let her go," Roman said, his voice deadly quiet. "I said I'd let them go. Them being the waitress and the customers. I never said anything about your girlfriend here." Hale smiled. "She walked into my trap voluntarily. That makes her fair game." Elena's stomach dropped as she realized just how badly she'd miscalculated. Hale had never intended to honor any deal. He'd just wanted the other hostages gone so he could focus all his attention on destroying the 2 people who mattered most. "Last chance, Hale," Roman said. "Walk away now. Disappear. Leave the country. I'll give you a 12-hour head start before I tell the feds where to find you." "Generous, but I think I'll pass." Hale nodded to his men. "Kill them both. Make it slow." The gunmen raised their weapons, and all hell broke loose. The windows exploded inward as Victoria's team came through in a coordinated breach, flashbangs turning the world white and deafening. Elena hit the floor as bullets started flying, her hands over her head, trying to make herself as small as possible. Above her, Roman moved with lethal precision. He'd already drawn his gun and put 2 rounds into the nearest gunman before the man could even turn. Victoria came through the window like an avenging angel, her weapon tracking and firing in controlled bursts that dropped another of Hale's men. The diner had become a war zone. Elena crawled behind the counter, trying to get to cover, her ears ringing from the gunfire and flashbangs. She could hear Roman shouting orders, could hear return fire from Hale's remaining men, could hear the sickening sound of bullets punching through walls and glass and human bodies. Then sudden silence. Elena peered over the counter. 3 of Hale's men were down. The 4th had his hands raised in surrender, Victoria's gun pointed at his head. And there, in the center of it all, stood Roman and Marcus Hale, facing each other like gunslingers in an old western. "It's over, Hale," Roman said quietly. "Is it?" Hale's gun was already in his hand, pointed directly at Roman's chest. "Because from where I'm standing, I still have 1 bullet, and I'm fast enough to put it through your heart before your people cut me down. Maybe, but you'll still be dead." "So will you." Hale's smile was terrible to behold. "And that's all that matters now. Taking you with me. Making sure you don't get your happy ending with the girl you destroyed my empire for." Roman's expression didn't change. "Then do it. Pull the trigger. But know that the moment you do, Elena walks out of here alive and free, and everything you did, every threat, every scheme, every desperate move, will have been for nothing." Hale's hand trembled slightly on the gun. And Elena saw her moment. She grabbed the coffee pot from behind the counter, still hot from the morning's brew, and threw it directly at Hale's face. Hale screamed, his gun hand jerking up reflexively as boiling coffee hit his eyes. Roman moved instantly, closing the distance and striking Hale's wrist with enough force to send the gun clattering across the floor. Victoria was there in a heartbeat, forcing Hale to the ground, her knee in his back and her gun pressed to his skull. "Don't move," she said calmly. "I've been waiting for an excuse all night." It was over. Just like that. Marcus Hale lay on the filthy diner floor, his face blistered from coffee burns, his empire in ruins, his freedom measured in the seconds before federal agents arrived to take him into custody. All his power, all his schemes, all his carefully constructed control had collapsed in the space of a single night. And Elena stood behind the counter, still holding an empty coffee pot, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief and the sudden understanding that she'd survived something that should have killed her. Roman was beside her in an instant, his hands on her face, checking for injuries, his eyes wild with something that looked almost like panic. "Are you hurt? Elena, talk to me. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay. Her voice broke. "I threw coffee at him." "You threw coffee at a man pointing a gun at me. It was all I had." And then Roman was laughing. Actual laughter, raw and relieved and completely inappropriate for a crime scene. He pulled Elena into his arms and held her like she might disappear if he let go, his face buried in her hair. "You're insane," he said into her hair, "completely insane, and I'm so glad you're alive." Elena clung to him, her hands fisted in his jacket, letting herself shake now that the danger was past. Around them, Victoria's team was securing the scene, calling in the authorities, making sure Hale's people were disarmed and restrained. But all Elena could focus on was Roman's heartbeat against her cheek, steady and strong and alive. They'd survived. Both of them. Against all odds and reasonable expectations, they'd actually survived. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Federal agents would be here soon to take Hale into custody, to collect evidence, to ask questions that Roman would answer with the careful precision of someone who'd prepared for this moment. But for now, in the wreckage of Rosie's diner with the taste of smoke still in her lungs and coffee splattered across the floor, Elena let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was finally over. The federal agents arrived exactly 7 minutes after Hale hit the floor. Elena watched from the diner's doorway as they swarmed the scene with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. Marcus Hale was hauled to his feet, his face still red and blistered from the coffee burns, his hands cuffed behind his back with enough force to make him wince. The man who'd orchestrated her terror for 8 months, who'd bought pieces of her life like she was something to be owned, looked small now. Diminished. Just another criminal being processed through a system that would grind him down to nothing. "Elena Vale?" One of the agents approached her, his badge glinting in the morning light. "I'm Special Agent Morrison. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened here." Elena glanced at Roman, who nodded once. Permission, or maybe just acknowledgement that this was part of the price they'd have to pay for survival. She spent the next 2 hours giving her statement, told them about the stalker, about Roman's protection, about Hale's threats, and the fire and the hostage situation that had nearly ended with everyone dead. The agents listened with expressions that gave away nothing, taking notes on tablets and occasionally asking questions that felt designed to catch inconsistencies. But Elena had nothing to hide, not anymore. When they finally let her go, dawn had fully broken over Brooklyn. The diner was a crime scene now, yellow tape cordoning off the entrance, forensic teams photographing bullet holes and blood spatter, and the shattered windows that Victoria's team had breached through. Rosie stood across the street with the other customers who'd been held hostage, wrapped in emergency blankets and talking to victim advocates who'd appeared with the kind of speed that suggested Roman had called them in. Elena walked over to her friend, suddenly unsure what to say. How did you apologize for bringing a war into someone's livelihood? How did you explain that their diner had become ground zero for someone else's revenge? But Rosie just pulled her into a fierce hug. "Don't you dare apologize," Rosie said into Elena's hair. "Don't you dare. That man was a monster, and you stopped him. That's all that matters." "Your diner can be fixed. You can't be brought back from the dead." Rosie pulled away and held Elena at arm's length, studying her face. "You saved my life in there. Traded yourself for me like it was nothing. So don't apologize. Just promise me you'll never be that stupid again." Elena managed a weak laugh. "I promise." "Good." Rosie squeezed her shoulders one more time, then stepped back. "Now go. That man of yours looks like he's about to wear a hole in the sidewalk pacing. Put him out of his misery. Roman was indeed pacing, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand running through his hair in a gesture that made him look almost vulnerable. When he saw Elena approaching, he ended the call immediately. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I've been better. I've been worse." Elena looked back at the diner. "Is Rosie going to be okay? Financially, I mean. The damage is already covered. Insurance will handle the structural repairs, and I've set up a fund to compensate her for lost business during renovations." Roman's expression was carefully neutral. "She won't lose anything because of this." "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Roman's eyes met hers. "This happened because of me, because I brought my world into her diner. The least I can do is make sure she doesn't suffer for it." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to say that none of this was his fault, but they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Roman's world had collided with hers the night she pulled him from that burning car, and the ripples from that collision had nearly destroyed everything she cared about. But they'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, they'd survived. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now the federal prosecutors build their case against Hale. With the evidence I provided, plus what happened here tonight, he's looking at decades in federal prison. RICO charges, racketeering, attempted murder, kidnapping, they're going to throw everything they have at him." "And you? Will they investigate you too?" Roman's smile was thin. "They've been investigating me for years. But like I said, my operation is clean enough to survive scrutiny. I'll probably have to answer some uncomfortable questions about my relationship with you, about why I was protecting a civilian, about whether there was quid pro quo involved." "Was there?" "No. I helped you because it was the right thing to do." Roman's voice was steady, certain. "Everything else, the feelings, the connection, the fact that I'd burn the world down before letting anyone hurt you, that came later." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to face yet. Victoria appeared beside them, her tactical gear replaced with a clean jacket that didn't hide the fact that she was still armed. "We need to move. Press is starting to gather, and the longer we stay here, the more questions we'll have to answer." Roman nodded and gestured toward the SUV. Elena climbed in, exhaustion finally catching up with her in waves that made her bones feel like lead. She'd been running on adrenaline for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be just tired, not terrified, not fighting for survival, just bone-deep exhausted. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet. Roman made calls in a low voice, coordinating cleanup and damage control, and a dozen other things Elena didn't have the energy to process. Victoria drove with her usual controlled aggression, navigating morning traffic like it was a combat zone. When they finally reached the penthouse, Roman's war room was mostly empty. The laptops were dark. The tactical teams had dispersed. All that remained was the aftermath, empty coffee cups and scattered papers, and the faint smell of cordite that had somehow made it back with them. "You should sleep," Roman said, guiding Elena toward the bedroom. "So should you." "I will, eventually." But they both knew he was lying. The bedroom was exactly as Elena remembered from her brief visit before. Massive bed, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. It felt wrong somehow, being here after everything they'd survived, like the luxury was mocking the violence that had brought them to this point. Elena sat on the edge of the bed and started unlacing her boots with hands that shook from more than just exhaustion. Roman knelt in front of her and took over, his movements gentle and precise. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "About what?" "About whatever's going through your head right now. Because I can see you thinking, and I need to know if you're planning to run." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd just fought a war to keep her alive, who'd risked everything he'd built to protect someone he barely knew, who was still kneeling at her feet like she was something precious, instead of the chaos magnet who'd destroyed his carefully controlled world. "I'm not running," she said. "I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. Because the threat's gone now, right? Hale's in custody. His organization is dismantled. The forged records will be corrected. I can go back to my life." "You can," Roman agreed, "if that's what you want." "What do you want?" Roman was silent for a long moment, his hands still on her boots. Then he looked up at her with eyes that held nothing back. "I want you to stay. Not because you owe me anything, or because you need protection, or because you're caught up in the aftermath of something neither of us planned. I want you to stay because you want to be here. Because being near you makes me feel like maybe I'm not just the sum of all the terrible things I've done. Roman's voice was raw, honest, in a way Elena had never heard before. But I'm not going to ask you to live in my world if it's not what you want. You deserve better than shadows and secrets and the constant threat of violence. Elena reached out and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rough stubble along his jaw, the warmth of his skin, the slight tremor that suggested he was just as scared as she was about what happened next. "What if I don't want better?" she asked. "What if I want messy and complicated and real? What if I want you, exactly as you are, shadows and secrets and all?" Roman's eyes closed briefly, like her words had physically impacted him. "Then I'm the luckiest bastard alive, or the most foolish. Probably both." Roman stood and pulled Elena to her feet, then into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had tried to tear them apart. "Sleep. We'll figure out the rest when you wake up." But Elena didn't want to sleep. She wanted to stay in this moment, suspended between the violence of the past and the uncertainty of the future, where the only thing that mattered was Roman's heartbeat against her cheek and the simple fact that they were both still breathing. "Stay with me," she whispered. Roman nodded and kicked off his own boots, then lay down beside her on top of the covers, still fully dressed. Elena curled into his side, her head on his chest, and let exhaustion finally drag her under. She woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of fresh coffee. Roman was gone, but she could hear voices in the other room, his and Victoria's, discussing something in tones too low for Elena to make out. She found them in the kitchen, both hunched over a laptop showing what looked like legal documents. "What's happening?" Elena asked. Victoria looked up first. "Good, you're awake. We need your signature on some paperwork." "What paperwork?" Roman gestured to the screen. "The forged records Hale created are being corrected. Your apartment building, your bank accounts, your employment history. Everything's being transferred back to legitimate ownership or deleted entirely. But we need your authorization to proceed with some of the corrections." Elena sat down and scanned the documents. They were dense with legal language, but the core message was clear. Marcus Hale's 8-month campaign to control her life was being systematically erased. Every purchase, every forgery, every manipulation was being unwound until nothing remained but Elena's actual history. "What about the apartment?" she asked. "The one Hale bought through shell companies. Who owns it now?" Roman and Victoria exchanged a look. "You do," Victoria said finally. "The building was purchased using funds seized from Hale's organization. Federal prosecutors agreed to transfer ownership to the victims of his schemes as part of the restitution process. Your name is on the deed." Elena stared at her. "You're telling me I own my apartment building?" "You and the other tenants, collectively. It's been set up as a housing cooperative. You'll still pay rent, but it goes into building maintenance and improvements instead of lining some landlord's pockets." It was too much to process. Elena had gone from being a waitress, one missed paycheck away from homelessness, to a property owner in the span of a single night. The whiplash was making her dizzy. "What about Hale's other victims?" she asked. "The people he manipulated, the businesses he destroyed?" "Being compensated from his seized assets," Roman said. "It won't make them whole, but it's something. The prosecutors are being unusually aggressive about victim restitution this time. I think the attempted murder of civilians in a public diner made it personal for them." Elena signed the documents with shaking hands, watching her signature appear on screen after screen, each one a small reclamation of the life Hale had tried to steal from her. When she finished, Victoria closed the laptop and stood. "I'll file these with the court. Elena, it's been an experience. Try not to throw any more coffee at armed criminals." "I'll do my best." Victoria left, and Elena was alone with Roman in the enormous kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows, the city sprawling beneath them like something they'd conquered together. "What happens to us now?" Elena asked. "To you and me?" Roman leaned against the counter, his expression carefully neutral. "That's up to you. Stop putting this on me. I want to know what you want." "I want—" Roman stopped, started again. "I want to wake up next to you every morning and know you're there because you chose to be, Not because you're afraid or obligated or caught up in circumstances. I want to build something real with you, something that isn't founded on debt or protection or the aftermath of trauma. I want to be someone you trust, not because I've proven I'll burn the world for you, but because I've proven I'll be honest even when it's hard. That's a lot of wants, Elena said softly. I'm a greedy man. You should probably know that about me. Elena moved to stand in front of him, close enough that she could see the tiny flecks of gold in his gray eyes. You want honesty? Here's some honesty. I'm terrified. I'm terrified that this feeling between us is just adrenaline and proximity and the kind of intensity that comes from surviving something traumatic together. I'm terrified that if I stay, you'll realize I'm just a waitress with no education and no prospects who happen to be in the right place at the right time to pull you out of a burning car. I'm terrified that your world is too big and too dangerous, and I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder waiting for the next Marcus Hale to come for me. Roman's hands came up to frame her face. And yet you're still standing here. Because I'm also terrified of walking away, of spending the rest of my life wondering what could have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Elena's voice was barely a whisper now. You asked me what I want. I want to stop being afraid. I want to build something that's mine, not something someone else can buy or control or take away. And I want... She swallowed hard. I want to do it with you, if you'll let me. Roman kissed her then, soft and slow, and nothing like the desperate collision in front of the burning warehouse. This was a promise, a beginning, a conscious choice made in daylight instead of darkness. When they finally pulled apart, Elena felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. So what's the plan? She asked. Do I move in here? Do you move into my newly acquired cooperative apartment? Do we get separate places and date like normal people? Roman smiled, a real smile, not the careful mask he usually wore. What do you want to do? I want my own space, at least for now. I need to figure out who I am without someone controlling my life, even if that someone has good intentions. Elena squeezed his hands. But I want you in that space, as much as you can be. I want to wake up to you on weekends and fall asleep on your couch watching terrible movies and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes. I have people who do dishes. Then I want to argue about whether that's excessive or practical. Elena grinned. I want normal, whatever that looks like for us. Normal, Roman repeated like he was testing the word. I can do normal. Can you, though? Because normal means you don't get to pay my rent or solve my problems without asking or orchestrate my life from the shadows. That's going to be hard, Roman admitted. The protecting thing is kind of ingrained at this point. I'm not saying don't protect me. I'm saying ask first. Talk to me. Let me make my own choices, even if you think they're wrong. Elena's expression turned serious. I need to know that this relationship is built on partnership, not protection. That you see me as an equal, not something fragile you have to shield from the world. Roman was quiet for a moment, processing that. Then he nodded slowly. You're right, and I'm probably going to mess this up sometimes. Default back to old patterns, because that's what I know. But I'll try. I'll try to ask instead of assume, to share instead of control, to trust that you can take care of yourself. And I'll try to let you in, to not push you away when things get hard or I get scared. Elena leaned into him. We're both going to mess this up. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of building something real. The next few weeks passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the violence that had preceded it. Elena went back to work at Rosie's diner once the repairs were finished, slinging coffee and taking orders and pretending she hadn't held the place hostage with a pot of scalding liquid. Rosie hired extra staff and gave Elena a raise she hadn't asked for, claiming it was for hazard pay, but they both knew it was because Rosie had a soft heart under all that Brooklyn toughness. Roman came in most nights, back to his corner booth, but now Elena would slide into the seat across from him during her breaks, and they'd talk. Really talk. About his businesses, the legitimate ones and the gray area ones he was slowly phasing out. About her plans to maybe go back to school, get a degree in something useful, build a future that was more than just survival. About the weird, complicated, messy thing they were building together. The federal case against Marcus Hale moved forward with the grinding inevitability of bureaucracy. Elena was called to testify in front of a grand jury, spent 2 hours recounting her ordeal in clinical detail, while Hale's lawyers took notes and looked for inconsistencies they could exploit. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, the recording from the wire Elena had worn into his club. The grand jury returned indictments on 17 counts, and Hale was denied bail pending trial. Roman testified too, though he was tighter-lipped about what he'd told the prosecutors. Elena suspected he'd traded information about Hale's broader network for immunity on his own gray area operations, but she didn't push. Some things she was learning to let lie. 3 months after the diner siege, Elena stood in her apartment, her actually owned, not rented by criminals apartment, and looked at the boxes scattered across the floor. She'd bought furniture. Real furniture. Not the thrift store cast-offs and sidewalk finds that had filled the space before. Nothing expensive, nothing that screamed money she didn't have, just solid, comfortable pieces that felt like home. Roman was helping her assemble a bookshelf, his expensive suit jacket draped over a chair, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that Elena had discovered were surprisingly distracting. "This piece doesn't fit," he said, frowning at the instructions. "That's because you're trying to put it in upside down. The diagram is unclear." "The diagram is perfectly clear. You're just stubborn." Elena took the piece from him and slotted it into place with a satisfying click. "See? Easy." Roman gave her a look that suggested he was filing this moment away for future revenge. "You're enjoying this." "Immensely. It's not often I get to be better at something than you." "You're better at lots of things than me." "Name 3. Making terrible coffee, throwing scalding liquid at armed criminals, and walking into dangerous situations with absolutely no plan." Elena threw an Allen wrench at him. He caught it without looking and grinned, that rare, genuine smile that still made her heart stutter. They finished the bookshelf as the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Elena of fire, but no longer filled her with terror. Just memory. Just history. Just the price they'd paid to get here. "Stay tonight," Elena said, as they stood back to admire their handiwork. "I was planning to." "No, I mean stay. Officially. Bring some of your things over. Keep a toothbrush here. Stop pretending you're just visiting." Roman turned to look at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You sure?" "I'm sure. We've been doing this dance for 3 months now. You're here most nights anyway. Might as well make it official." "Elena, if we do this, if I move even part of my life into your space, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "That you'll tell me if it's too much. If you need space, if you need time alone, if you need me to back off. Because I meant what I said about not controlling your life, but I'm still learning how to do that. And I need you to help me." Elena moved to stand in front of him, taking his hands in hers. "I promise. And you have to promise me something too. Anything. No more secrets. Not about your business, not about threats, not about anything that might come back to hurt us. We're partners now. That means full transparency, even when it's uncomfortable." Roman was quiet for a moment, and Elena could see him weighing his words carefully. "I can't promise there won't be things I need to keep confidential for business reasons. People trust me with information I can't share, but I can promise that anything that affects you, anything that might put you in danger or change your life, those things I'll tell you about, even if it's hard. That's all I'm asking." "Then yes, full transparency on anything that matters." They sealed it with a kiss, and Elena felt another piece of the foundation they were building click into place. The trial began 6 months after the diner siege. Elena attended every day she could, sitting in the gallery and watching as prosecutors methodically dismantled Marcus Hale's empire in front of a jury. They called witness after witness, victims of his schemes, former employees who'd turned state's evidence, forensic accountants who traced money through labyrinths of shell companies. When Elena was called to testify, she walked to the stand with her head high and told her story without flinching. Told them about the stalking, the threats, the 8 months of manipulation she hadn't even known was happening. Told them about the hostage situation, about Hale's confession that he'd bought her life piece by piece just to use her as leverage. Hale's lawyers tried to make her seem unreliable, tried to suggest she was a willing participant in Roman's criminal enterprise, tried to paint her as a gold digger who'd latched onto a wealthy man and fabricated a story for sympathy. But Elena didn't break. She answered every question with calm precision, maintained eye contact with the jury, and when the defense attorney got particularly aggressive, She simply said, I pulled a stranger from a burning car because it was the right thing to do. Everything that happened after that was Marcus Hale's choice, not mine. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they came back, Elena was sitting in the gallery with Roman on one side and Rosie on the other. The foreman stood and read the verdict on all 17 counts. Guilty. 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 All the way down the list. Hale's face remained impassive, but Elena saw his hands clench on the defense table, saw the slight tremor that suggested his carefully maintained control was finally cracking. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, looked at Hale with something approaching contempt. Mr. Ali, you orchestrated a campaign of terror against innocent civilians for no reason other than spite and greed. You manipulated financial systems, corrupted public officials, and threatened lives, all in pursuit of revenge against a man who had the audacity to protect someone you wanted to hurt. This court finds your actions reprehensible and your lack of remorse disturbing. She sentenced him to 47 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 25. Hale would die in prison. Elena felt Roman's hand find hers in the gallery, squeezing once. It was over, really, truly over. Marcus Hale would never threaten her again, would never orchestrate anyone else's terror, would never see freedom again in his lifetime. They walked out of the courthouse into spring sunshine, and Elena felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in a year. How do you feel? Roman asked. Like I want to go home and do something completely normal. Make dinner, watch TV, fall asleep on the couch like regular people. Then that's what we'll do. But before they could leave, a young woman approached them on the courthouse steps. She was in her late 20s, professional attire, nervous energy radiating off her in waves. Excuse me, are you Elena Vale? Elena tensed instinctively. Yes? I'm Sarah Chen. I was one of Hale's victims. He bought the building where my restaurant operated and then evicted me to make room for one of his own businesses. Sarah's words came out in a rush. I just wanted to say thank you for standing up to him, for giving testimony that helped put him away. A lot of us were too scared to come forward, but you weren't. And because of you, we got justice. Elena didn't know what to say. She'd never thought of herself as brave, never considered that her testimony might mean something beyond her own case. I'm just glad it's over, she managed. It is for us. But there are others, people Hale victimized, who are still trying to rebuild. I'm organizing a support network, helping people navigate the restitution process and find resources. If you'd be interested in joining, we could use someone with your experience. Sarah handed Elena a business card, and Elena took it automatically. I'll think about it, she said. Sarah smiled and walked away, and Elena stood there staring at the card, something shifting in her chest. You should do it, Roman said quietly. Do what? Help them. Turn what you survived into something that helps other people survive too. You're good at that. I'm a waitress who got lucky. You're a survivor who fought back. There's a difference. Roman's hand found the small of her back, steadying. And if you decide to do this, I'll support you. Whatever you need, resources, connections, legal assistance, it's yours. Elena looked up at him. Not going to try to talk me out of it? Tell me it's too much work or too risky? No, because this is your choice and I trust you to make it. Roman smiled slightly. See? I'm learning. That night, Elena made dinner in their because it was officially both of theirs now, apartment, while Roman set the table with the mismatched plates they'd picked up at a second-hand store. They ate pasta and talked about mundane things, the leak in the bathroom that needed fixing, the neighbor who played music too loud, the movie they'd been meaning to watch. After dinner, Elena pulled out Sarah's business card and stared at it for a long time. Tell me honestly, she said. Do you think I can do this? Help people navigate legal systems and restitution processes when I barely understand them myself? Roman set down his wine glass. I think you walked into a burning building to save strangers. I think you threw coffee at an armed criminal to protect me. I think you stood in front of a jury and didn't flinch when they tried to tear you apart. So yeah, I think you can do this. It's different, though. That was survival. This is choosing to walk back into the trauma and live there. Only if you let it be trauma. It could also be purpose, meaning, a way to make sure what Hale did to you wasn't for nothing. Elena turned the card over in her hands, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Then she picked up her phone and dialed the number. Sarah answered on the second ring. Hello? Hi, it's Elena Vale from the courthouse. I've been thinking about your offer. Elena took a deep breath. I want to help. Tell me what you need. 6 months later, Elena stood in a community center in Brooklyn, facing a room full of people whose lives had been upended by Marcus Hale's schemes. Some had lost businesses, some had lost homes, some had lost years to legal battles they couldn't afford to fight. Now they were fighting back. Elena had helped establish the Victims Resource Network, a nonprofit organization that connected Hale's victims with legal aid, financial counseling, and emotional support. Roman had provided seed funding and office space. Sarah had built the infrastructure, and Elena had become the face of it, the survivor who'd stood up and won, who could tell others that recovery was possible. The restitution process is complicated, Elena told the group. There are forms to fill out, deadlines to meet, evidence to gather. But you don't have to do it alone. We have lawyers who can help you navigate the system, financial advisors who can help you rebuild, and other survivors who understand what you're going through. She talked for an hour, answering questions, sharing resources, watching hope slowly replace despair on faces that had carried fear for too long. When the session ended, an older man approached her, late 60s, worn hands that spoke of decades of manual labor. My name's Robert. Hale bought the building where I had my automotive shop, tripled my rent until I couldn't pay, then evicted me. Took everything I'd built over 40 years. Robert's voice shook slightly. I wanted to give up. Thought I was too old to start over. But hearing you talk, seeing what you did, it made me think maybe I can fight. Maybe it's not too late. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. It's not too late. We'll help you. That's what we're here for. Robert shook her hand, his grip firm and grateful, and walked away looking lighter than when he'd arrived. Roman was waiting for Elena outside the community center, leaning against his car with the kind of casual elegance that still made her heart skip. How'd it go? He asked. Good, really good. Elena leaned into him, letting his arms wrap around her. I think we're actually making a difference. You are. Every day. Roman kissed the top of her head. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? You tell me approximately every 3 hours. I'm aware. Just making sure. They drove home through Brooklyn streets that had once felt threatening but now just felt like home. Elena's life looked nothing like it had a year ago. She was still a waitress. She'd kept her shifts at Rosie's because she actually enjoyed the work. But now she was also a victim advocate, a nonprofit organizer, a woman with purpose beyond just survival. And she had Roman. Not the mysterious stranger in the corner booth, not the crime boss orchestrating protection from the shadows, but the man who helped her assemble furniture and did dishes without complaint and supported her choices even when they scared him. They'd built something real together, something messy and imperfect and completely theirs. That night, Elena stood on the balcony of their apartment, looking out at the city lights. Roman joined her, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. What are you thinking about? He asked. How different everything is now. How a year ago I was just trying to survive, and now I'm actually living. Any regrets? Elena thought about it honestly. Thought about the terror and the trauma, and the night she still woke up from nightmares about fire and guns and voices threatening to erase her from existence. Thought about the scars that would probably never fully heal. But she also thought about the people she'd helped, the lives she'd touched, the relationship she'd built with a man who'd proven that love could be fierce and protective without being controlling. No, she said finally. No regrets, because even the hard parts led me here, to this moment, to you, to a life that feels like mine. Roman tightened his arms around her. I love you. I don't think I've actually said that yet. You haven't, but I knew. I love you, Roman repeated like he was making up for lost time. I love your courage and your stubbornness and the way you throw coffee at people who threaten me. I love that you make me want to be better than I am. I love that you chose to stay even when leaving would have been safer. Elena turned in his arms to face him. I love you too. I love that you've learned to ask instead of assume. I love that you support my choices even when they terrify you. I love that you're trying to build a legitimate life because you want to, not because you have to. I'm still working on that last part. I know, but you're trying. That's what matters. They stood together on the balcony as night fell over Brooklyn. Two people who'd survived fire and violence and the systematic dismantling of their lives, who'd chosen each other not out of obligation or fear, but out of genuine, complicated, hard-earned love. The city stretched out before them, full of possibility and danger, and 1,000 stories being written in apartments and diners and penthouse suites. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of human experience, Elena and Roman had carved out a space that belonged only to them. A space built on honesty instead of secrets, on partnership instead of protection, on the kind of love that didn't erase the scars but made them worth surviving. 3 years later, Elena stood in a brand new community center that bore her name, the Elena Vale Center for Victim Advocacy. Roman had funded it, Sarah ran it, and Elena served on the board, helping to shape programs that supported survivors of financial crimes, intimidation, and manipulation. Marcus Hale was 3 years into his sentence and would die in prison. Rosie's Diner had expanded into a second location, and Rosie had made Elena a partner. Roman's businesses had gone almost entirely legitimate, and the gray areas that remained were shrinking with each passing year. And Elena and Roman were planning a wedding. Nothing big or fancy, just close friends, the people who'd stood beside them through fire and federal trials, and the messy work of building a life together. They'd chosen a small venue in Brooklyn because this borough had witnessed their worst moments and their best ones, and it felt right to make their promises here. The night before the wedding, Elena and Roman sat on the balcony of their apartment, the same balcony where they'd stood 3 years ago and chosen each other despite everything. "Nervous?" Roman asked. "Terrified," Elena admitted, "but not about marrying you, about all the people who are going to be watching, about whether my dress fits right, about whether I'll trip walking down the aisle." "You're going to be perfect. You're biased." "Absolutely, but also correct." Roman took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "Elena, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." Roman took a breath. "I've been working with the federal prosecutors for the last 2 years, helping them dismantle the remaining pieces of criminal infrastructure in the city, testifying against people who make Hale look like an amateur. And I'm done. As of next week, my cooperation agreement is complete, and I'm out." Elena stared at him. "You're out? Completely out?" "Completely out. No more gray areas, no more questionable business partners. No more looking over my shoulder wondering when the next Marcus Hale is going to appear." Roman's eyes met hers. "I'm going legitimate. Fully, entirely, irrevocably legitimate. Because I want to build a life with you that isn't shadowed by the things I used to do. I want us to be safe, really safe. Not just surviving, but thriving." Tears burned Elena's eyes. "You did this for us. I did this for me too. Because you showed me that there's another way to live, that I don't have to be defined by the worst things I've done, that redemption is possible if you're willing to work for it." Elena pulled him into a kiss that tasted like salt and promise, and the future they'd fought so hard to reach. The next day, Elena walked down an aisle lined with people she loved toward a man who'd learned to let her make her own choices, who'd transformed himself because she'd shown him what he could be. And when the officiant asked if she took Roman Carrick to be her husband, for better or worse, in sickness and health, through fire and federal trials and whatever other chaos life threw at them, Elena said yes without hesitation. Because they'd already survived the worst. Everything else was just living. And they'd do it together, as partners, as equals, as two people who'd been forged in flame and emerged stronger on the other side. The reception was held at Rosie's Diner because where else would it be? The place where Roman had watched Elena for months, where she'd whispered her first plea for help, where they'd survived Hale's final desperate attack. The bullet holes had been patched and painted over, the broken windows replaced, but the memory remained. A reminder that love could be born in the most unlikely places. Rosie gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Victoria made a speech about Elena's terrible tactical decisions and remarkable survival instincts. Sarah talked about how Elena had turned her trauma into purpose and helped dozens of people rebuild their lives. And Roman stood up and said simply, "Elena saved my life twice. Once when she pulled me from a burning car, and once when she showed me that there was a better way to live. Everything good in my life now exists because she had the courage to help a stranger. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets it." As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Elena found herself standing outside the diner, looking at the street where she'd once been stalked by strangers, where she'd been terrified and alone and convinced that her life was spiraling beyond her control. Roman joined her, sliding his jacket over her shoulders against the spring chill. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come, how different everything is." Elena leaned into him. "About how I used to think saving your life was just one moment, one decision. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of saving both our lives, of giving each other permission to be something different than what we'd been." "You think we're saved now?" "I think we're saving each other, every day, in small ways and big ones. And I think that's enough." They stood together in the place where their story had begun, two people who'd survived fire and violence and the systematic destruction of everything they thought they knew about themselves. They'd been broken and rebuilt, scarred and healed, destroyed and remade. And now they stood on the other side of it all, hand in hand, facing a future they'd built together from the ashes of the lives they used to have. No more secrets, no more shadows, no more running from threats they couldn't see. Just two people, loving each other fiercely and honestly, building something real in a world that had tried to tear them apart. And that was more than Elena had ever thought possible on that rain-soaked night when she'd first whispered "help me" across a diner booth and changed both their lives forever.